The Amarillo Police Department confirmed this evening that the man who was shot and killed in a confrontation with officers last night was not carrying a gun. He was holding a power saw, which on a darkened street would resemble a weapon.
The sawzall did have a trigger feature on it. It also had a long blade on the end of it, and when pointed at somebody from quite a distance, it does have the appearance of a rifle type of weapon.
The police department also revealed the man's identity today. Larry Woolsey, age 61. As we first reported last night, the call for help came in around 9:30 about a man who was said to be pointing a rifle at people in a neighborhood on Angeles Drive. When officers got there, they found the man about a block away on East Bonita. They began talking to Mr. Woolsey, but he refused to follow their commands. The statement from APD said he moved aggressively toward the officers, and that's when two officers opened fire, hitting Woolsey. He died that night at the hospital. The two officers have been placed on administrative leave while the investigation into the incident continues.
We're rolling.
All right.
First state, spell your name.
Yeah. Jason Herring, Jasonherring. I'm the 47th District Attorney serving Potter and Armstrong counties. Thanks for showing up this afternoon. I appreciate you coming on short notice. This morning, obviously, our Potter County Grand Jury this morning was presented the complete investigation into the officer-involved shooting that occurred in the 700 block of Bonita Avenue on the night of May 1st this year. Obviously, that's been worked very hard. We're a couple of weeks in, but we were able to not only have law enforcement investigation completed, but our independent review of that completed, and we took that to the grand jury this morning. We spent a significant amount of time with the grand jury. Obviously, our job as prosecutors is to conduct our own review and then present all the facts and advise the grand jury on the law with regard to all those things that tie into use of force incidents, self-defense, protection of third parties, et cetera, duties of officers. So we were able to present the facts. Obviously, some of that information has been released already by APD, but we now have presented the full investigation to the Potter County Grand Jury. So in short, on the night, just after 9 p.m. on May 1st, AECC received a call from a homeowner in the 4600 block of Angeles Drive in Amarillo, Potter County, Texas, and reporting that he had been outside doing some homeowner tasks, watering plants, etc., when he had a fenced yard and his dogs erupted and were clearly reacting to some kind of provocation or action. He went around the house, observed what he described as a roughly 50-year-old tall white male near the fence, actively yelling and moving towards his dogs. He approached the area. Of course, it's very dark. It's just after 9. The sun's fully down. Moonrise that night, according to the meteorologist, was hours off, approximately 4 in the morning. So it's pretty dark. He approaches the gentleman and says, "Are you okay?" Something to that effect. "Can I help you?" At which point, this individual directs his attention to the homeowner, and he's carrying something in his arms. He points it at him. Homeowner immediately retreats. And it just so happens that the doors to the house are open. There was some cooking smoke that was going on in the house. He begins immediately to shout to his wife to call 911. And we, of course, the content of the investigation includes that call. He reports to her, and she reports to 911 that he's observed a tall white male that's presented and pointed a rifle at his dogs and at him. Their son is approaching the house. They wave him off because they're concerned this individual is walking away but is still present, and they see what they believe to be a rifle in his hands as he walks off. Of course, they're interviewed at length later, but they report him last seen leaving their home southbound on Angeles Drive. Was a busy night that evening, according to the investigation in Amarillo. Officers that ride that beat were actively involved in calls, so a unit was pulled from a little bit further away in town. They responded. Took about 7 minutes or so from the time that the call went out until they were in the area. They immediately begin to canvass. Of course, the information they have comes from dispatch, like it always does, the report from the homeowner that they're looking for a middle-aged, tall, white male, possibly wearing a hoodie, but carrying what the homeowner reports as a rifle. Of course, it's very dark out there in the area. If you're familiar with that 700 block of Bonita, a lot of residences there, but it's not well lit. They first encounter Mr. Woolsey in that 700 block. He's stepped out of the street, and the officers have been obviously given the information from dispatch from the homeowner that this guy's carrying a rifle. And upon review, the investigation reveals their first view of him, and if you watch the video and listen to the conversation, they clearly see him and say, there's the guy with the rifle. They pass him, turn around. When they first see him, he's got something, looks like to me, like if you're familiar, if you're a firearms person, it looks like what I call an SBR, short barrel rifle, or a carbine rifle in his hands. Of course, very dark, the glare of the police lights, but he's standing just off the side of the road, and that's pointed towards a residence that they're passing. They immediately turn around, engage their lights, and of course, turn all the lights on their vehicle on, make it clear that they're peace officers. They pull the vehicle up close enough to approach, but because the individual's reported to have a rifle and they believe they've seen a rifle, they engage from a little bit further distance. They open the doors, immediately begin to give him commands, and police drop the rifle, and it's pretty clear, very clear from the video that you can see the individual carrying what looks like a short barrel rifle in his right hand, back to the officer, stops, pauses, swings that up to his left support hand, turns around and points that item at the officers, at which point they engage him with fire, and he is down. They approach as they would any other time, immediately secure the area, and at which point they find out that reported rifle and what they believe to be a rifle is a Sawzall. Of course, it's a black Sawzall with a blade with the square end in it, about, I would say, about that long. Of course, as he falls, it's under him. So as they approach, you'll see, if you go through the appropriate channels and get that content, you'll see that all up until the time that they begin to put hands on Mr. Woolsey and administer aid to him, they believe he still has a rifle under him. And at that point, they realize it's a Sawzall. In the end of the day, obviously, we present the entire content to the grand jury. One thing that I will say about the content of the investigation, just personally, after having reviewed it myself and through our office, is that up and until the point that Mr. Woolsey is administered aid and they remove him, roll him off that item, everybody that was involved, the homeowner, the officers, me, the folks in my office that participated in our independent review, and clearly the grand jurors believed that there was a rifle that Mr. Woolsey had. Now, obviously, the law in Texas is such that whether it's you or I, average citizens, or it's law enforcement, we all have the right of self-defense, and law enforcement officers have the additional sworn duty, to not only to protect themselves and their partners, but anybody that's around and about, people that are sitting in their houses, might be out watering their plants there on Bonita, right? And so, in short, after spending a couple hours presenting the totality of the investigation that not only law enforcement did, but the 47th DA's office completed, our independent review, we presented that to the grand jury. They, of course, when they deliberate, nobody's in the room but them. We advise them of all the facts. We give them all the material they need. We advise them as prosecutors as to the law. They deliberated and they returned unanimously that the officers were fully justified in the actions that they took that night with regard to Mr. Woolsey. It's a tragic circumstance. Our hearts go out to Mr. Woolsey's family and to the officers and their families. Nobody leaves these unscathed. In totality, I'll tell you this, some of the details that I found salient here. The engagement distance was about 26 yards. You'll be able to see that in the video. One officer fired 8 rounds, the other officer fired 6 rounds. That's less than half of the complement their weapons hold. I'll say that we're very fortunate in Amarillo to have very well-trained and equipped officers. Everybody here, law enforcement, 47th DA's office, and our grand jurors all agreed that their officers are fully justified in their actions that evening. And unfortunately, if this were to happen again, the same result would occur based on the facts and circumstances as they were that night. Like I say, we are greatly appreciative of the fact that that we do have excellently trained and law enforcement, and if this were to happen again, we'd expect those officers or any others to respond the same way. Are there any questions I can answer for y'all?
Do we have any idea why Mr. Woolsey was in the neighborhood?
Mr. Woolsey, our investigation revealed that Mr. Woolsey is a kind of long-term homeless individual. had lived with his mother for years and is very familiar and spent most of his life in that area of town. When his mother moved to the south side of town, he chose not to go. That address at 728 East Bonita was the homeowners there knew Mr. Woolsey, and for a few months it allowed him first to stay in a tent in their yard and then let him move into their garage. So unfortunately, in the conduct of the investigation, those homeowners had been on a trip. They're usually the people, as best we can tell in our investigation, have repeated contact with Mr. Woolsey, say on a daily or repeated basis. But they'd been out of town. They returned home a few minutes before this happened. As best we can tell, Mr. Woolsey was out and about with that Sawzall. I can't speak to his state of mind at all or anything like that. Of course, we inquired. We did everything we could do to find any other video or any other people that had interacted with Mr. Woolsey, but all we had was our homeowners that were scared out of their wits when they thought this fellow was up there pointing a rifle at them, and then our officers who encountered him. Like I said, we might have had, bearing in mind that it's May 1st in Amarillo and we're finally, getting some nice weather people might want to be out in. I was hoping that we would find some more people, but based on the darkness and everything else, we didn't find anybody else or have anybody else come forward. So in short, Mr. Woolsey, it sounds like whatever he was out and about doing, he was on his way home. He was going back to go to the garage that he lived in there at 728 Bonita.
And so Mr. Woolsey was not listening to commands. He was not.
Correct. It's you'll find that upon review that from the time the officers first encounter Mr. Woolsey and say, that's the guy, there's the rifle, that's him, make the turnaround, get out, he was walking away from them. They're telling him, stop, drop the rifle, drop the rifle, drop the rifle. The only response he makes is a brief pause as he swings the Sawzall up, turns around and points it back to the officers. And so he did not comply with their commands, and based on everything that they knew, and if, like I said, I'd invite you to go grab that stuff and look at it. It's pretty, like our grand jurors, none of whom are cops or law enforcement or work for me or for the chief of police, or 12 average citizens of Potter County were all unanimous, and it's exceptionally tragic. It's unfortunate. Nobody, especially our peace officers, want to be involved in a situation like that, but he did not respond. In fact, what I would say is that he did about the only thing that would have evoked that response from our officers that he shouldn't have done. He didn't obey their commands, and turning and presenting that as though it's a weapon. Like I said, I think I started to say earlier, obviously in Texas the law does not require you or I or law enforcement to wait to see if if you start receiving fire. It's based on the reasonable person standard. If you reasonably believe that you're being presented with an imminent threat of serious bodily injury or death, you are allowed to respond in kind. And like I said, it's a very unfortunate situation, but our officers responded exactly in the way that we as citizens would expect them to, the way that they are trained, and did exactly what we would expect to happen. Unfortunate, tragic set of circumstances, a perfect storm that resulted in a tragic outcome for Mr. Woolsey and his family, and for the officers involved. Obviously, like I said earlier, nobody comes out of these untouched. There's a lot of consequences for a lot of folks, and in the end of the day, yeah, Mr. Woolsey made some choices there that were very unfortunate and resulted in his death.
Have you talked to Mr. Woolsey's family about maybe he was impacted by mental health sicknesses or anything?
I haven't personally. I don't engage that. Obviously, this is one of those things that through the law enforcement investigation and our investigation, we've reviewed all the documentary evidence and things like that we're able to get a hold of. It's one of those things we like to try to contain that content. We don't want to let anything out there that might bias, say potential jurors down the road, or that might get into the press or into the public on social media and start to create a bias that may or may not be supported by the facts. But yes, that was considered, and the information that we have, like I said earlier, and I'll expound on a little bit, is Mr. Woolsey has had some past substance abuse problems, some interactions with the law, and presently was clearly an active alcoholic with alcohol use and abuse. And there was some the medical that we have indicates that he had been consuming alcohol.
I was going to ask you, Did blood work or autopsy show that he was on anything?
Blood work, autopsy showed what we'll call a presumptive positive alcohol, right? And those results are in the works, but in this instance, I made the choice to go forward with that. You know, what his state of intoxication is less relevant in this. I mean, you can easily observe the man and his behaviors and make a judgment just without any science, but there was indications of the presence of alcohol in his system at the time.
And did Mr. Woolsey have any previous actions of, you know, harassment or engagement in the neighborhood or in the community?
I'll put it this way: that based on our investigation, there are folks that may not know him by name, but they know him as the guy who kind of goes around and you know, may or may not be confrontational, may be kind, but there's not a lot of people that we were able to find. They might recognize the face, didn't have a name, very limited interaction. The only people that we were able to locate, other than his mother and you know, family, that have had recent interaction with Mr. Woolsey were the homeowners that were allowing him to stay in their garage.
Do we know about how long he was staying in that garage?
The information we have is that situation came about somewhere early this year, January, I believe, and he had been at their house. As best I could tell, he had no external employment. The folks that we talked to at 728 Bonita basically indicated that they tried to help him out. They'd feed him now and again. He did odd jobs for them, but according to them, there was, at least the content of our investigation shows that there was, you know, an absence of employment. The money he might have came from the family there at 728 Bonita, and they helping him out.
Was there prior complaints of anybody in the neighborhood having, not this issue, but similar issues?
Nothing that we were able to, interactions with law enforcement, with citizens, nothing that was anywhere near approaching to this kind of level or degree or that kind of behavior. Maybe just what I might call drunken disorderly, those kind of things, but those are very few and far between, and that's, we had no indication, I'll just answer it this way, no indication that anybody out there had seen him carrying around what they thought was a rifle prior to this. Nothing there.
In the last press conference we did, they mentioned that the officers were put on leave for the trial. Have they been reinstated, or is it still?
Well, that's I'll give you my portion of the answer that I can give you there, and then of course Chief Birkenfeld will be the. But the general procedure is such that they're put on paid administrative leave while we conduct the investigation, and then once things are through. Both the law enforcement investigation and the 47th DA's office review, and our presentation to the grand jury, then I would expect that decision is either being made or been made by the chief at this point.
You mentioned that he had previous police involvement. Did he have any type of record or anything along those lines?
Well, we'll say there were numerous. I won't speak to convictions or anything like that, but he had numerous prior law enforcement contacts with regard to alcohol and substance use over time. Nothing radical, but there is a history there.
Like field interviews, that sort of thing?
Yeah, there's. I can't tell you the content of criminal history, but there's been law enforcement contact with regard to substance use and abuse and some other criminal potential.
Going back to the presumed rifle, was it his that he owned, or was it the people that he was staying in the garage?
To the best of our ability to determine, the homeowner there at 728 Bonita says, "Hey, look, I've got several Sawzalls, but I don't know if that was mine or not. One of those things. Don't recognize it. Haven't used them in a long time. Don't know."
Have you guys ran a VIN or anything to connect to who may be owned by?
No, as far as I'm aware, there's no. We don't have any ability. Of course, we've gone over that Sawzall with the fine tooth, or CSI has, and other. There's no way for us to determine ownership or purchase or anything like that on the Sawzall. And as far as I'm aware, they're based on at the scene. Of course, no other weapons. Mr. Woolsey did have a backpack on, and you'll be able to get the information on what was in there, the contents, through your PIA the process.
You don't know if he was doing any work with it or anything?
As best we can tell, no. There was no indication that he was working anywhere, or why he had that. It's as best I'm able to determine. We believe that it came from the home there, but we can't prove that. We don't know. Based on the owner of the home going, it might be, I don't know. Right? So we spent some time trying to find that. Like I said, unfortunately, we've had no one come forward, and we weren't able to locate anything other than what we have in our investigation at this point. Nobody else came forward. Nobody else in the neighborhood canvassing came forward and said yes, I saw Mr. Woolsey that evening. And so as best we can tell, the answer is no, he wasn't working with it. He didn't have a job doing anything. We don't know why he had it, only that he did.
You talked about the lighting. Was this on the street or was this in an alley?
Yeah, no, this incident occurred, and the first contact by law enforcement with Mr. Woolsey, there was in the 700 block of Bonita. I'd say right around the 734 address, which is very close to 728. So I would say, at least it seems safe to assume that he was on his, after doing whatever he was doing that evening, he was on his way back home to 728 in the garage there. And this happened in the street out in front of those addresses.
So from visual, the lighting is pretty bad in that area, would we assume?
Right.
Or is it just because of the time of night?
Yes. Our review. There are not street lights in front of those homes. Any light that would come in that area, especially on a night like that where the sun's well down and there's no moon or anything out, is going to be ambient light from homes. And as a matter of fact, the content of our investigation, it was very dark out there. And so you go from very dark to the glare of police lights, and if you've ever had that combination, it makes for a difficult visual situation in going from dark, and the older I get, the less fast my eyes do that. So, but yeah, I would say that the circumstances out there, there's no street lights, it's very dark, and the physical, the night we had that night, it was real dark and there wasn't much light, and there was a lot of, well, I'll put it this way, the investigators, CSI, there was a lot of attention paid to the lighting out there and distances and where people were, and it was very helpful and useful both in our investigation and the police investigation and to the grand jury in understanding what the officers had in their collective consciousness that night, what they saw, of course, obviously, what unit video and body cameras show is not necessarily what the officers saw, but when you listen to those, I would just forward the idea to you that you will hear things that will give you a very good handle on what was in their minds at the time.
So you had two body cams from the police and one from the vehicle?
We have unit video and we have body camera video, yes. What else can I answer for you?
You spoke with his family about, evidence of mental issues and stuff like that. Has there been any?
I haven't actually personally spoken, but yet it's obviously, like I said, we will have that contact, but we haven't. Our office has not had yet because we don't want to put information out there that might bias folks. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
But was there any conversation about, bereavement or condolences or anything to the family of the deceased?
Not yet, but that will come, yes. I mean, we're just a few hours out of the grand jury, and so obviously we present our investigation to the grand jury, talk to the grand jury first, and then I get my head together and call y'all. So we've, those things will come, but they have not occurred yet. I know that that there's been some contact with the police department. I can't speak to what that was, but I know that it has occurred.
I guess one question, how long did the grand jury deliberate?
We, in total, I think this morning, we spent more than a couple hours down there. Their deliberations, yeah, I'd be guessing, I'll speculate, but it was fairly, maybe 20 minutes, but we spent hours with them going through things. Before then, like I said, what happens is once we're finished, we step out of the room, and if they need us back, they give us a buzz and we come back in. But their deliberations were probably about 20 minutes after spending more than a couple hours in the review of the.
And that's just because the evidence seems so probably.
Yeah, and it's one of those, like I say, this is one of those things where I'll go ahead and tell you, like I said already, it's a unanimous. All the grand jurors were unanimous in their return of their justified circumstances here, and it's one of those things where obviously folks take this stuff very seriously, as they should, and I'll just forward it to you that they could have taken 2 minutes, they could have taken 2 hours, but we'd already spent a couple hours with them, and so what we always do is make sure that they know that we're available to come back in and answer any questions. We want them to be comfortable in feeling and knowing that they have everything that we can give them that they need to make their determination, and they do that without us there, as it should be.
Are you able to talk about the officers specifically? Just how their state of mind, how they were after the shooting?
I will. I've got an opinion there. I've got a definite opinion there, but I would defer that to them and to the content of the investigation that y'all can now get. I will say that, like I said earlier, nobody is happy or. Always, of course, officers are going to be very concerned anytime there's a use of force. It's the last thing that they want to have to do, but they have to be prepared to do it. And I'd assume that for everybody, Mr. Woolsey's family and the officers and their families, it's been a very long couple of weeks here.
Was he basically dead from the shots, or was they able to do any life-saving measures?
Well, yeah, immediately, you know, cops and lawyers, we're not doctors, we don't play them on TV, that immediately upon making secure what they believe to be that rifle, of course, always they immediately engaged in life-saving measures, but based on the autopsy, at least one of those rounds that struck Mr. Woolsey was immediately fatal.
Were there any neighborhood witnesses or anything to this?
Nope. Of course, we canvass, we go out and knock on doors. Due to the darkness of the time of night, the only witnesses to the actual event are the two officers and Mr. Woolsey and the cameras and audio.
Good.
Video. As ABC 7's Trayvon Gay reports, the sister of the man who was killed wants to know why.
A grieving sister looking for answers.
They've just been really quiet about it. They won't call us back. They won't email us back.
Shannon Adams is the sister of Larry Woolsey. Woolsey was shot and killed by police on May 1st after officers responded to a report of a man pointing a rifle at people. According to police, they told him to drop what they thought was a gun, but he turned towards officers who shot and killed him. After the shooting, police determined Woolsey was actually holding a reciprocating saw.
And I asked him, and I said, but he did not have a gun, did he? And he said, no, ma'am, he didn't. And I think that if I didn't know that he wouldn't have a gun, they probably would never even said it.
Hearing what happened from a friend, Adams began requesting the video. As did we. ABC 7 filed an open records request now that officers have been cleared in the shooting and the investigation is closed. But APD is arguing that the video should not be public record because it, quote, relates to an inactive case that did not result in conviction or deferred adjudication.
You were sitting in front of the police chief and, you know, you can't access this video. What would you say to him?
Well, like, what did they have to hide is what I'm wondering. You know what I mean? I don't know. I know it's public information. You know, I know it's public information. And I think they're just trying to put things off until, you know, maybe we forget about it.
We reached out to APD to speak with Chief Martin Birkenfeld about why the department is not releasing the video. Birkenfeld is out of town for a death of a family member, but he sent us a statement. It reads in part, I absolutely believe in transparency of law enforcement. That is why we open our books and turn over all evidence to the district attorney. However, I believe that the routine release of video of justified officer shootings serve more to feed a morbid interest in violence and does not significantly contribute to the overall health of the community and the police department. But Shannon says seeing the video would help her mental health.
It would get rid of some of the anger that I have because I wake up mad and I go to bed mad. You know, I can't sleep. Wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning just angry.
In Amarillo, Trayvon Gay, ABC 7 News.
And you can read the chief's full statement online on our website at abc7amarillo.com.